G'day listeners and welcome back to the Keeper League podcast for season 2022. We're the AFL Fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars, we only talk about the lesser knowns and the players that are going to bring value to your draft and Keeper League teams. My name's Heff and I'm joined by my co-host Dawson, not Kaes this week. Almost said Kaes actually. It's in a bit of a groove, but yeah, I'm joined by my new co-host Dos. Welcome to the show, mate. You're no stranger for our listeners. You've been around for a while now.
Been around here and there, yeah.
But yeah, it's first official show.
This is the debut. This is the long-anticipated debut. You've put a lot of social media out there trying to pump me up as the host. Hopefully, I can live up to it. Obviously, without the great man Kaes here with us for this first show.
So yeah, Kaes is definitely still a part of this show. He's just out of action for a couple of weeks, probably the first two podcasts, but he'll be back soon. So you're stuck with Dossie and I first up. So unfortunately for everyone else, then you're missing out on the Oracle's words of wisdom. But look, he'll be back in a couple of weeks, and yeah, look, he'll be spilling out.
And he's given you his notes for today as well. So we'll be able to give the words of wisdom vicariously through Heff and I.
Correct.
See how we go.
Correct. So yeah, hopefully we can do him justice and yeah, make him sound good. For those watching at home, we are live streaming. I'm having a few issues with the chat by the looks, so I'll try to get that working through the
it's the first episode,
podcast.
If
right. Not, I'll
get there
just get rid of it. So yeah, it's all good. Yeah, but Dossie, what have you been up to this pre-season or off-season, really?
Oh, look, I've been having a little bit of a break, obviously, after the fantasy season finished, but now ramping right back into it. And just from myself, went away for a little bit and had a bit of a break, just usual stuff, really, but really back into the fantasy research now and getting well and truly underway.
Well, that's good to hear. Actually, the issue with the chat was no one was actually talking to us. So
that's fair.
It's actually working.
It's definitely working. What about yourself, mate? You get up to anything exciting? I was pretty boring myself. That's why I don't have much to talk about.
No, I was chucked into isolation over Christmas, which sucked. So yeah, my son's third Christmas, and he was pretty bloody excited about it. Got thrown into tatters, so I was a bit sad. But we had a good day at home. I think he actually enjoyed it in the end, just staying home playing with his toys, not being carted halfway across the countryside in the end. So I think it was fine with that. But since then, I've just been dodging Corona, basically, just trying to not catch it. And
all trying our best.
I can't deal with that 14-day isolation. So yeah, no indoor venues for me, and just lying low, basically.
And what about the fantasy stuff, mate? You well and truly cracking on with that now, aren't you?
It took me ages to get back into it, like to find the motivation to actually get started again. But yeah, once the draft hit and things like that, and then we started doing a few different things and starting getting rankings sorted and things like that. I've definitely caught the itch. I'm pumping out articles at the moment.
The brain starts churning and you can't stop. When you get started, you can't stop.
Exactly. I'm loving it at the moment. So I've caught the bug again, so I'm back into it. Anyway, speaking of bugs, this thing will stop your stomach bugs if you ever have one, and that's your Remedy Kombucha. So thank you to Remedy Kombucha for the drinks tonight. I'm going with the raspberry lemonade tonight, and I think Dossie is as well.
I'm also going. That's the one you gave me, so that's the one I'll drink. My beloved Butch.
You don't really have a choice, but yeah. Anyway, we'll crack those now and listen to that delicious sound.
There we go.
All right, cool. Do you have anything you want to say before we get started there, Dossie?
Yeah, mate. Well, I think today I was, I must have been first pre-season training back for a lot of teams. I think a few had theirs like last week and stuff, but today was the day where we saw a lot of photos coming out of the first trainings. Really exciting stuff. This is when we check out how big the players' pipes are, what sort of things they're rocking, and we saw Nat Fife's moustache and goatee, which was
with the visor as well.
Very questionable decision. But I think there's no one else that's worked harder in this off season. There was no pipes more impressive. I was looking at Paddy Dow, Patrick Lipinski. Their pipes were pretty big. But in Studio Heff here, there's one man with some monumental pipes. He's got some Scotty Thompson-like pythons there, mate. What's going on there?
Oh, Scotty Thompson might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I think, what was that? It was August 12th. It was actually my birthday in 2020. I jumped on the scales and I was 104 kilos. Yeah, and now last time I jumped on the scales, I was 77 kilos.
Jesus.
So stripped a bit of weight off. Been hitting the gym, working on the gun show.
I can see that. I was going to say, check out Heff's Instagram. There's a few shirtless pics there, mate. A few more than Isaac Heaney these days.
They are wholesome family photos with me and my son on the beach. Thank you very much. Stop perving there, mate. But anyway, all right, we'll get stuck into the podcast. So tonight we're going to be looking at Adelaide, Brisbane and Carlton. So hopefully we can find some Keeper League gems from those teams. We'll get stuck straight into it, and here we go. All right, so the first team we're looking at tonight is obviously the Adelaide Crows. Like we said earlier, I think Kaes has supplied us with his notes for the Crows. So basically this year, I think last year when it was just me and Kaes and I, we just did 3 players each from each team. Now this year we're going to separate into do our own notes for a team each, essentially. So Kaes was in charge of Adelaide and he's left us with his notes here. So we'll get stuck into it. And the first player he wanted to talk about was Wayne Miller. So Miller has only played 2 games in 2 years. He averaged 75 in 2018 and 77 in 2019, but he's notched up 4 career tons in those years as well. But as it stands, we definitely haven't seen the best of Wayne Miller. Wouldn't you agree, Dossie?
Oh, absolutely. And I think all of us were pretty excited. Wasn't it just last year when he was getting ready for preseason, had the injury in preseason, when all the talk was he's back and he's raring to go, even in a role change, looking at playing some midfield time and that sort of thing. We were all very excited about that. So he's always kind of been on our radar and just never quite, 75 and 77 is fieldable in your teams, but never gone to that uber level that I think a lot of people thought maybe in his junior years.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, we're looking at him in 2022, so this could be his year, providing he stays fit, I guess. But yeah, Kaes thinks he's likely to play on either one of the flanks, half-back or half-forward, and he reckons he could average 70 or 80 doing so, being conservative coming back from injury. He reckons owners are going to want to keep him, and there's plenty of upside to him, but the injuries put him off. Would you agree with those sentiments?
I think, it's pretty spot on. I don't know about, probably got not a great hold on what average he's going to be putting up this year. I think you can have probably a higher scope if he does get any midfield clock, but I agree with Kaes in that, I'd probably expect not a heap from his first year coming back, seeing as it's such a, decent time off, especially only playing a couple of games in 2 years. So wouldn't expect too much, but definitely looking at keeping him. And if he's fit, he's a pretty exciting prospect with that defensive tag next to his name. And what about you, though? Like, you've got Jordan Dawson coming in to take a role. Like, there's a few guys vying for spots there.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Where do you see him playing, forward or back?
Oh, probably back or mid. Like, they definitely like playing him in the mid. They've said that for a couple of years in a row that they want to get him in there. Just depends how he's looking. And he was one of these players we saw today with the preseason shot coming out fit and firing in training at this time of year. That's a good sign for someone that we want to see fit, round 1.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, I thought he looked better for the Crows up forward, but they're so depleted everywhere. Like, I don't think he's actually going to be a better player for them. I think they just like using him up forward because it's probably more dangerous there for him. But then, they're so depleted everywhere, I just don't know where he's actually going to play. I reckon probably on a half-back flank this season. I just
think the ball use from him is where you can't. I don't personally. I always think that those players flourish way better just behind the ball, or like they're trying to be putting him sort of in the midfield eventually. So I think defender or mid, I wouldn't think forward, but neither do I. But I think probably half-back flank is probably the way he's going to start, just given the Oracle's probably spot on here. Yeah. Let's be honest.
Okay, we shouldn't really doubt him. Speaking of, the next one we might have to doubt him though. He's going with a flyer real early, so this is classic Oracle right here. But the next one he's talking about is James Borlace. Now, I don't reckon I could pick James Borlace out of a lineup, to be honest.
Nah, when he mentioned his name, I was like, it's a deep cut. It's a nice one. Though.
Jump straight to it, but that's fine. But so that's his flyer pick, and I'll give you the reasoning. So he didn't debut last year, I don't think, but played 17 games in the Sandful and averaged 60. So 60 in the Sandful, and he's a flyer pick. But yeah, look, he had a good end to the season. That's what Kaes liked about him. So he went with scores. I like the way he's tried to word this. He's tried to word this. He ended the season well, featuring scores of 80, 114, and 116. Now, I thought, that's a pretty good last 3 games. But no, that's across his final 5 games. He cherry-picked the good scores out of it. So that's across his final 5 games. There was a few lower ones in the final 5 games as well. But apparently he had a scoring bump at the end of the season due to taking over the ruck duties in the Crows because Kieran Strawn was promoted to AFL side. Okay. He was the number 1 ruck. So they used him as the kind of, I guess, the third ruckman in their side. Then, in those big games where he scored big points, he just showed what he could do around the ground. So he was picking up touches and had some good hit-out numbers. I think he had 23 hit-outs in both of those games as well. But also what was interesting, he was named runner-up in the reserves best and fairest as well. So yeah, he's not likely going to be used as number 1 ruck, I don't think. But I guess it kind of shows his flexibility. But I still think, if you look at Kaes obviously thinks he's going to be a chop-out ruck. He could come in as a centre-back, be a chop-out ruck. But you think Phil Thorpe would jump into that role?
That's right. Yeah, they've got a couple of blokes up there, Himmelberg or Frampton, both still at the club. So I don't know. That might just be to give him a bit of exposure at the second tier.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've still got O'Brien there, who's going to be the number one ruck for years to come, you'd imagine. And Strawny looked... I don't know if Kaes is going to talk about Strawny.
Yeah.
He looked bloody all right too when he goes. So I don't think he's going to get...
Yeah, I think Kaes is more so saying that he might find his way into the side as a key defender and then pick up a few extra points as a ruckman. But I just don't see him doing that at the AFL level. Like, I reckon it's purely just rucking the twos because there was no one else. And
look, he is the oracle. I'd probably be going against this one in your keeper leagues. But hey, you know, he's got a track record now. He's got a nickname for a reason.
Yeah, it took him 3 years. He started getting a few right. But anyway, Jackson Haightley is the next one. So he's a mid-only this year, which is, I guess it's not that surprising, but a bit disappointing for owners. But it's shaping up as a huge year for Jackson Haightley. He was a number 14 pick in the 2018 draft and showed some promise in his time with the Giants, but failed to make his presence shown at the Crows. So, apparently had groin issues all last year. So I think they kind of kept that pretty quiet. It only came out like mid-year or, there was whispers all the time, but it wasn't real common knowledge. But he's apparently was injured in the groin all last year. So he only played the 3 games featuring in rounds 6, 7, and then 16. I think he got injured in round 16 as well.
Yeah, right.
So one of those was injury affected. Yeah, there we go. 75 in his first game, 54 in the second game. Didn't play again until round 16, was injured for a score of 28 in there. So when you look at his sample numbers, though, he was averaging 23 touches a game there and had 102 AFL fantasy point average from his 10 games in the sample. He had 4 tons in there, which included scores of 140, 136, and 132 points. Look, he's a player that he's having these injury concerns, but we've got to remember that Darren Burgess has come in to the Crows as well. He's a bit of a fitness guru when it comes to getting players like this over the line. So he could see some upside there. But look, as a mid-only, I don't know, he's going to make a hard case to keep him, and he's probably going to slide in a few drafts, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I would think. Are you still high on him? Because I actually am. I still really love Jackson Haightley as a player, and I think he kind of just is one of these guys where it's like, are they ever going to get the opportunity? If they do, I think he'll flourish. Like when he played in round 6, I was just looking. I do love my centre bounce attendances.
I know you do.
On your site, I've been using him for
our
years.
Our site,
sorry.
Yeah.
But in round 6, that's when he actually got centre bounce attendances. So 56% centre bounce attendances was his highest for the year. The other games he didn't get a chance at AFL level, essentially.
Yep.
56%. He went at 75 points in 65% time on ground. That point per minute still shows promise to me that he could score at AFL level if he gets a chance. 6 tackles, 17 touches in, just over half a game.
Yeah.
I still have huge hopes for him, but it's such a risk knowing, Matt Crouch is coming back potentially this year. If that comes to fruition, you've got other guys vying for the midfield. Could it be another Braden Sire, Charlie Constable, even though I hope Constable gets good, but is he one of these guys for his career? I really hope not, because if he isn't, I think he can be a really good scorer.
Yeah, I think because we saw what he could do at GWS. He looked like he was on the verge.
Yeah,
I think if we know that in the background there was some injury niggles, we have to give him another chance. I think so.
I'm willing to give him 3 more chances.
I'm not high, but I'm not off. You know what I mean? So
I'm pretty high if he gets a role. Like I'll be watching him pretty closely this preseason.
Yeah, okay. We'll just have to wait and see. He's one of those players. We're going to say this probably for a lot, but add him to your watch list, see what's happening in the preseason, and then make your assessment from there. Oh God, we have to talk about Harry Schoenberg. So it comes as no surprise, I think, that Kaes has included Harry Schoenberg in this, and he's on the hot list, he reckons, as well. So average 69.4.
What is that? He's on Kaes' hot list.
Yes,
he's written this down.
Yeah, I don't know why. Just make sure we mention that he's on the hot list. But anyway, is that a TV show? It sounds like a quiz show or something like that. Anyway, averaged 69.4 last season, but the big thing is he averaged 83.8 from his last 5 games. He scored 108 in his final game. That was against North Melbourne from only 65% time on ground.
Scoffing at that,
hey?
That was just
North Melbourne. I think his only 2 good scores came against North Melbourne, didn't it? I was kidding. I think he had 2 really good scores against North Melbourne last year.
You still have to be a pretty good player to ton up, mate. Come on.
I guess, yeah, every now and then. Coming into his 3rd year this year, so it's obviously breakout season. There are some promising junior midfielders, I guess, but none that are going to take Schoenberg's spot in the midfield by the looks. So, I guess there's that injury cloud over Matt Crouch's head. Rory Sloane's getting a bit old. There should be some opportunities there for him. Now, Kaes has got him averaging 85 to 90. What do you reckon? On the money, higher, lower?
Look, I think there's that spot for that extra midfielder in there. They've got, I guess a lot just hinges on the health of their midfield, because it's been one that hasn't been healthy in the past few years. If Matt Crouch comes back, say, I see this being pretty, that's pretty high on the scope of what he can average. But
apparently is Crouch even training yet though?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I think a lot hinges on that.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm on the side of Kaes on this one. I think Harry Schoenberg's up for a big year. Like I've actually been, even though I sort of banter with Kaes a bit about this, Harry Schoenberg's one that I'm fully on board with him on this. Like low time on ground, pretty good points per minute when he plays centre bounce attendances, when he gets that midfield clock. He's a good scorer per minute. If he just raises up that time on ground and gets the centre bounces, he can score.
I don't think he's a bad player. And my only concern is from a fantasy point of view. So how big of a fantasy scorer is he going to be? Is he going to be that 100-plus average in the future that we're talking him up to be? That's one of my first concerns. And with the time on ground stuff, like, is he just a low time? Like, a lot of these bigger body midfielders are just low time on ground players. Is he going to boost it much higher than that? And then, the other thing is just, is he going to be that 100-plus average? Like, if he's going to be an 80, 90 kind of average each year, whoop-de-doo. Like, he's just another,
It's his third year, mate. I think he could be a 100-plus guy.
It's his third year, I know. But in his second year, he only averaged 69 points. So it's like, as a mid
70% time on ground.
I know, but I'm just saying.
That's like you build your fitness up over the preseason.
Yeah, I'm saying, I know that.
You get stronger, you play more time.
This is my question. So you think he's going to boost that time on ground?
Yeah, number? He's 20 years old.
Okay, yeah, but there's look at someone like Ollie Wines, who went most of his career up until basically last year. I know he's a big fantasy scorer now, but it took him.
What's your argument?
It took him 9 years to get there, to be an actual primo midfielder.
He's this guy is one of the bigger breakout candidates this year, Harry Schoenberg. And it is all role dependent for me.
Okay. I just don't like the bigger body types as like fantasy guns. Like, yes, they'll be handy, but I just don't think they're going to be up there.
What do you class as bigger body though? Because he's 182 centimeters. It's not really.
He looks thick. His head's huge.
I think that's puppy fat.
Yeah, I know. He just looks thick. That's what I mean. Like, I didn't want to say fat players, but
puppy fat.
Puppy fat. I guess you look at Clayton Oliver as probably the exception to the rule. But
that's how I kind of like saw him early days in terms of his development, but it's purely the time on ground. Like, that's all I see. If that improves, I'm on board.
I just see him as like a Ben Cunnington type. They're going to be one of those types of players. A guy that goes 80, 90 each week. Like I said, not a shit player. Very, very good for their team. From a fantasy perspective, I don't see him being one of those top 10 midfielders ever, like the way he's talked up to be. That's all. Not like when I was talking up Andrew Brayshaw a couple of years ago and Kaes was telling me he was never going to be a good fantasy scorer.
Yeah. I'd have to, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I would have thought that, a guy like Cunnington, the reason, like what you're saying, is he's just and same with Ollie Wines really, is they're just purely contested bulls.
Yeah.
I think Schoenberg can get the cheap pill, which is what you want.
Yeah, he was given opportunities to do that, but I don't know. Is that going to fly in a Crow side where they actually want to win games? Are they going to let someone get cheap pill for a while?
I reckon, it's Kaes and me versus you on this one, mate. I reckon. That's going to be that.
That's all right. We'll see what happens. Let's move on. So Kaes has got Ned Mchenry on his list. So this year should be telling for this guy. Look, Kaes doesn't think he's going to be a fantasy player, but he was tipping him pretty highly when he first got drafted. I do remember that. He ended 2021 with an average of 49.8 points, but finished the year off strongly, going at an average of 59.4 in his last 5 games. That's pretty strong. He played his best 2 games in the final 2 rounds of the year, putting up 75 and 82 AFL fantasy points, picking up 22 and 24 touches respectively in these matches. I think it looks like Matthew Nicks seems to love him as well, because and what he brings to the side. And Kaes reckons he looks more like a likely footballer and more of a fantasy type than James Rowe or Lockie Murphy in the side. So there's probably some safety in drafting him just because he'll play most weeks. He seems to have a spot in the Crows senior side now. And I guess everyone's going to need forwards this year, so you're going to have to fill him out with players who are going to play. But I guess Kaes thinks if he gets some consistency, there's a chance he could push to be a 70 average and maybe even an F5 option. What do you reckon?
I like him as a footballer and love the energy and spark.
Good intensity.
Oh, massive intensity. He's one of the Crows, one of the guys that they want to keep around for years. Just that energy gets everyone up and about. For fantasy, I'm not on board on this one just yet.
Yeah, neither am I. But anyway, we can move on from that because I think we're in a consensus there. Sam Berry is the next guy. So Kaes wants to give a little warning about this guy because he thinks he might be a tad overvalued in fantasy circles. He played 17 games last year and gathered a bit of fantasy hype after a couple of good games early. I think he was in a lot of classic teams early because he was a rookie playing. So the fantasy world was talking about him quite a lot. But the big worry about him is his ball winning ability. So he played 17 games last season, as we mentioned, but he only had over 10 touches in 8 of those games. So what's that? In less than half of the games, he didn't have more than 10 touches.
Yeah. I think is he one of these players that him and the Hawthorn debutant mid-season draftee, they both like Newcomb. They both had like more tackles than disposals on debut, just about.
Yeah, okay.
Wasn't that Berry? I thought he had like 8 tackles on debut or something.
Looks like a tackler. I think he does mention the tackle stuff down here in a second. But look, yeah, his best outing, he only had 14 touches. But in those 14 touches, he only had 2 kicks. The rest were handballs. So it doesn't really bode well for fantasy either. He only averaged 9 possessions for the game, 9 possessions for the season, and 42.8 AFL fantasy points. He played some sample stuff in there as well, averaged 84 points there from the 3 games he played there. The big thing, and you mentioned this with the tackling, he averaged 44 points per game in the sample just from tackles. Yeah. So that's like, he does do it, but he's kind of not as big at AFL level with it. And is that kind of big tackling numbers for someone like him sustainable at AFL level? I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. But if you look back at his junior stats, he only averaged 82.3 in the NAB League as well, and wasn't a high possession getter there either. So it doesn't look like accumulating has been part of his game, just going forward. So, and it kind of looked like he followed that into AFL level last year as well. But yeah, we're just not sure if he wins enough footy to be a genuine option. And the other thing as well, like Josh Rochelle, who's been drafted, plays a pretty similar role as that mid forward. Probably could surpass him early on because I reckon they're pretty keen to get him the side. There are a few other players that will probably go out before Berry does, but yeah, I don't know. Kaes is just definitely wants to warn people off him a bit because he thinks there's a bit of hype there. Maybe even put a bit of a line through him. What do you reckon? Yeah,
I'm pretty much, hate to agree with Kaes on pretty much all of these.
You're looking at me like you're looking like you were confused. You wanted to say something else, but then you were
no. I think what I was going to say is the player that you were talking about before that you were saying basically Harry Schoenberg could be is what I think Berry is in terms of just contested, just tackling, needs to be right around the ball to win it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like, I'd see him, he could have a role as that, either a pressure, if you're going to roll him as a pressure forward, it might be what he does, just tackle hard, basically play as a defensive forward, or if they need a role in the midfield where it's like a tagger, I just don't see him trying to get too much of his own ball, which is basically what Kaes has laid out.
Okay. Fair enough. AJS Hawker on the chat has just written the Berg with a big love heart, so he's on board there as well. Anyways, did you end up coming up any honourable mentions for the Crows? Yeah, you were pretty happy with Luke Pedler. Or you?
Was it Pedler? No, I was talking about the Moose. Oh, the man, the myth, the Moose, and that's Andy Macpherson. Who Kaes would not be happy about me mentioning him on the show in his segment.
Absolutely not.
Andy Macpherson, I just think if you want a defender that could potentially pop to that, 75, 80 average, I actually do have a bit of faith in Andy Macpherson. Look, no stats really back it up. Bit of the old
absolutely none, except for maybe one preseason game.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we did Sam, but I will use this prop. It is the Remedy Kombucha gut feel that we talk about, and that's for Andy Macpherson. I've just seen that stat that I talk about. It's just more of a feeling. It's the observable thirst. When he gets rid of the ball, he wants it back, and I love seeing that. They actually mention him, if you've been keeping looking at some of the preseason content that the Crows have been producing, they're talking about the fitness stuff in the preseason with the new guru. Andy Macpherson's been the one that's like come back in ripping shape, and they're like, Moose is tearing up the track. So, I don't know. It's just a flyer. You wouldn't pick him up. You'd pick him up as one of your last picks, or even off the waiver after a week, or see how he goes in the preseason. But just the Moose, just a cheeky one for Dossie.
The reason why I thought it was Pedler, and the reason I probably just got Pedler on the brain, is he did average 101.5 in juniors. Pedler did, and he did debut. He did debut last year. I think played a couple of games. Didn't put up the fantasy numbers in the seniors.
Is he forward eligible too? I think he might be.
Not sure. I think he might be actually as well. So that's why he probably comes under the radar, or onto the radar a little bit. If he can play a few games and his listeners forward and gets a bit of a run in the midfield.
A lot of guys were talking about playing midfield though. That's why Adelaide's just such a big watch this preseason.
Yep. But anyways, that wraps up Adelaide. So now we'll move on to a team that one of us actually did notes for, and that is Brisbane. All right, we're moving on to Brisbane now, and Dossie has had a look at the lines and come up with a few players he thinks of worthy of looking at in your keeper league team. So, who you got?
Yeah, well, this first player, I genuinely actually thought he was going to be 2G for P. When I went and put his name down, I was like, this guy has to be, I think a lot of people will be keeping him regardless, but Zach Bailey for the Lions, a mid-forward, averaged 72.7 last year, but he's a superstar in the making, this guy. Just 22 years old. For me, he's Toby Green 2.0. I've said it a few times. He doesn't have that high-flying ability like Toby Green does, but his forward craft is on the absolute elite level. So we saw him a couple of times last year win games off his own boot. One after the siren to get the win last year, and then that other one where he should have got the free kick to win the game. So basically, he just puts himself in the right spot at all times. Fantasy-wise, though, 87 average in his last 3 games. And he also had his first official career ton against the Pies in round 22 because he tonned up in the 2020, but it was adjusted. Anyway, do you think he's a guy that will keep forward status throughout his career? Because last year he was spruiked as being this guy that's going to go into the centre bounces. He actually did for a stretch. So what do you reckon?
I think that midfield role is pretty deep that they're going to have to find something else from doing them. But the thing is, like, you got Lyons who's probably, what is he, 30-something?
He'd be getting to 30, round 30.
I don't know, but then you've got Jared Berry who kind of is more playing on the wing and stuff like that, but he probably wants to get in there as well. So I don't know. I think I can see him keeping forward status just because they've got a few numbers they're going to roll through. My issue is if he doesn't get that midfield time, how consistent is he going to be? Like, he does kind of play as a bit of a smaller forward for large period chunks of games every now and then, but then he does go in there and does pop every few weeks. Actually, the more I think about it, he seems to pop more playing forward than he does when he goes in the midfield. I reckon some of the games where he got CBAs, if I remember correctly, some of the games where he got bulk CBAs, he wasn't actually scoring as well. The games where he scored well was when he's up forward and kicked a few goals and things like that, and that's where it kind of bumped his score up. Am I thinking correctly there?
I wouldn't think so, just because I remember last year doing the pod with Louis. Louis picked him up when he started getting centre bounces, and that's when he kind of turned to being a bigger scorer.
I thought that he was rubbish for the first few weeks when Louis was ready to trade him, and then he popped a bit later on. After those
maybe you're right. We'd have to check that out.
Because I remember him being furious with the pick, but then it kind of came good after a while. But it wasn't for the reasons he was thinking.
You're actually touching on the exact point. I think he will keep forward status, though.
Yeah,
I think he's just too good a forward, which is great for your keeper leagues. You get a guy that I actually think has a ceiling as a forward. I think he can get to like that 85, 90 every year and push bigger in his absolute prime.
He's a player that I feel like has just been around a bit longer. Like, he's only 22.
22, I know. So that's what I'm like. That's
he's
what I was
definitely
like,
got room for improvement.
I thought he'd average more too. I just thought he's just had such a solid year. But yeah, I really see him kind of taking it to the next level this year and being a really solid forward option. So I think he'll be 2G for P by the end of the year. Zach Bailey, the next player.
I'm excited about the next one because I own him and I need you to tell me what to do with him.
Okay, well, it's Dev Robertson, 61.9 average. So on paper, it looks pretty gross. But that was his first season, a full season. It was his second year. So he played one game, I think, in his rookie year. He was the draft flyer, or the guy, sorry, not the flyer, the opposite, the faller in his draft year. He was supposed to go a lot earlier, ended up going super late to Brisbane.
He missed out in the first round, and I remember Port had the next, I don't know this because I'm a mad Port supporter. Port had the next pick, and we traded it with Brisbane, so Brisbane could jump ahead to get him. Yeah. And we got their next year's first or something like that.
So this is a guy, we're talking about Brisbane with the stacked midfield, and this is going to come up, on pretty much all these players that are contesting for midfield clock. But Dev Robertson, just love the way he plays personally. It's just another probably remedy gut feel as well. The stats aren't great, but I feel like it's a lot to do with the role that he's put in, and he's basically in there as a pressure player. So his debut of the season though was very fantasy relevant. 93 in his debut this year, like his sophomore last year. 93 points, 17 disposals, 7 tackles, and
I got so excited.
The tackling is that huge strength as well. Sort of like that. You know how Jack Steele had to bide his time as a tagger early days?
Yeah.
The problem is he's not going to be able to get the amount of centre bounces that a Jack Steele got playing in that role. So this year's a big turning point for me. Do they want to put Berry back in there? Do they want to get McCluggage more time in there? That all depends to me on how his ceiling is this year. Long term, I think his upside is huge.
Yeah, I think long term, you're right. The thing with my league, or the league that Kaes and I are playing together, is we can only keep 16, and it's quite hard to get him into your best 16. But he's a player that I do think shows lots of potential. I just don't think, when you're only keeping 16, it's got to be like they've got to show something in the next year or two type thing. The next season, essentially, because otherwise you're just not picking your best squad, and it doesn't, really matter. You can pick good guys up in the draft.
When you guys have to make your decisions by?
Would generally be just before the Amy series, I think.
Just before?
Yeah, maybe we might. Or there's only 1 week. There's only 1 week this year, or 2 weeks.
I think it's just the one game again.
Yeah, so we might see. No, we probably won't see any Amy stuff.
Anyway, I think this year is going to be the telling factor of whether they want him in there right now or whether it's going to take time, and that's probably going to decide whether you want to keep him or not, because upside-wise, look, like 120 fantasy average in the Waffle Colts, 113 in the under-18s championships. And I noticed that was only the under-18 champs. He scored only just behind Caleb Sarong, was the only player in the 2019 draft class that he didn't outscore in fantasy-wise. So, absolute fantasy jet. The only thing I love about him more than his fantasy upside is those black shoes that he wears, mate. Have you just some players like back in the day, it was another Robertson, I think, Dylan Robertson or whatever. Him? He's the guy that made me fall in love with those black shoes. Dev Rob's bringing them back, like the pure black shoes.
Paul Chapman used to wear a pair.
I think they're becoming much more popular, but the way he rocks them, he's got the socks pulled down. It's a great look.
What's your look? What's your boot colour? You socks up, socks down?
I try and emulate that, but I've got fat feet, so I can always don't get to pick them. These days, it's the career savers.
Yeah, mate. I thought it would be. Yeah, you look like a career saver kind of player.
Let's move on to a man that probably should be wearing career savers, given the amount of injuries he's had over the last couple of years. But Jared Berry, 50.1 average.
Gross.
And was he? I don't think he would have ever been 2G for P though, because his averages, if you look back, maybe the 89 adjusted average in 2020 would have been pretty close to considered 2G for P in terms of he's on his way up. You know, he's a young player. You would have probably expected him to be captain of all the leagues.
Yeah.
Then, last year, groin issues just all year. He had a calf injury and another injury as well. So it was basically the groin issue was the big one. I still think he's just a first choice midfielder, inside midfielder for them when fit. What do you think?
He couldn't, he had opportunity to do it. I know he had injuries, I guess, last year, but he had opportunities later in the season when he came back in the side. They just weren't playing him there. I don't know. I'm just getting sick of waiting for him to kind of pop. It's been a few years and he kind of keeps, showing signs and coming back. I know injuries are a big factor.
Full preseason this year by the looks as well. If you watch Rob vlogs.
Yeah, if you look at their midfield, what do you got? Neil, you've got Lyons. Who else goes in through there? I guess McCluggage.
Well, that's the thing. They still, does he play still wing? He probably does.
Yeah.
That's where I think there's just a spot there. It's probably between the likes of him, Devin Robertson, who get a little look. And
Robertson.
Sorry?
Robertson.
It's gonna get me. And I was looking at the Amy Community Series from last year where they were kind of shaping up for the season and they were doing a fairly close trial run because you only had the one game. And Berry was one of the top 4 attendees, top fantasy scorer as well in that game. I know it's Amy Series and you can't take too much out of it.
Definitely don't take
anything out of
it.
I think he's still their first choice midfielder. He's just a specimen of a man.
First choice midfielder.
A first choice.
A first choice
midfielder.
Yes.
Just big body, endurance gun, kind of does a lot of the things you want. Great tackler. I think he hasn't even hit close to his tackling upside as well. I think they probably do play him over a Robertson early days.
I think definitely. You play Berry, he's just more of a senior player. I just don't know how I don't know. He has so much potential. I'm just he's just one of those players I'm just off of because I'm sick of waiting for him to come good. That's all. It seems like every year we're talking about Jared Berry. Like every year we've done this podcast, we're expecting this.
And the year you stop will be the year he pops.
Absolutely. That's like with every player when I'm choosing my keepers as well. But anyway, next one I'm very interested because I actually own this guy as well, stashed away, and that's Cam Rayner. So tell us about what you think about him.
The thing with Berry as well is I feel like he will go super early in drafts because of the name factor of the old days. So it's going to be a tricky time to draft. Anyway, Cam Rayner, forward, averaged the 67 adjusted back in 2020, did his ACL before last year when this is another guy vying for midfield time. So it's just a absolute.
Before he got injured last year, he was in
there. He was a
midfielder.
He was in there. Coming back from the ACL though, does that still happen? Does he still go straight into the midfield? We've got so many names we're talking about already. Robertson's lifted since then to be a contender to come into that spot as well. Berry's come back from injury. It's a tough one. I don't think he's going to be a huge scorer, especially for this year at least. And he's never really. I don't think he's never really shown a ceiling yet. And I'm not to say that's not going to happen, but fantasy, I think he's a great footballer, and I think this year's going to be a great breakout for him. I don't know where his fantasy ceiling kind of sits.
Well, we haven't seen him do anything massive yet. I think it was the year before he got injured. He basically played every game for what was the average? Did you write it down? It was not much, and he got a bit of midfield clock in that year as well, and still did nothing with it. So I think last year was the year he was, destined to kind of go big, but then the injury hurt him, and I just blokes coming back from ACLs. Not often do they go big, straight coming back. So I don't see him playing too much midfield this year. I think they're going to ease him into it kind of nurse him through. Like, again, you might see him go all right in 2023, but like for people that have him and are thinking about keeping him, I reckon it's probably, if you're especially in a mid-range, keeping between 16 and 18, it's probably time to drop him.
It's probably a good point. It's a good point that you said, though. Fagan kept the faith with him for a long time, playing as a midfield when he wasn't really showing much. And I think that's going to do his confidence wonders for the long term. Like, he's looking incredibly strong, fit, fast, all that sort of thing. So I'm still just skeptical as the fantasy ceiling. Available as a forward, though, if he is that midfielder, which I don't see him getting a heap of midfield time, but if he is, he could be one of the guys that pops. I don't really buy it though.
I'm not sold.
Joe Danaher's my next player, 72.2 average last year.
Yep.
This guy is talking about long absences from footy, coming back, first season back after massive 2 years basically playing 10 games total or something like that. And before that, he had a full season in 2019, I think it was, where he was actually pretty bloody good, putting up the 84 points. Another preseason, Danaher's still in his prime at 27 years old. I thought he would be... I just felt he's been one of these guys that's been around since he was, a teenager, just been around forever.
Yeah.
I thought that he'd be a bit older. I just think if you're looking for a bit of a forward that has some upside and definitely going to get you some big scores when he kicks bags of goals. You've got Hipwood out of the side for the start of the year. I could kind of see him having a pretty solid year next year.
You got to have players like Danaher in your keep league teams, because he's going to be digging so deep in the draft. He's going to be picked up. You play him at F4, F5, maybe an F3, depending on how early you go on, mids and defenders and things like that. Definitely just a good option. He's just like one of those forward fillers, kind of like your stocking fillers at Christmas. You just stuff him in there, just get him to score you 70 points or whatever. You delist him at the end of the year and you pick up someone else like that.
Do you think he can get back to, he scored nearly 85 back in the day, and I looked at some of the numbers. I think I wrote it in the article that we'll be putting up, but not in my bloody notes. But so Brisbane, the year that he scored close to 85, Essendon were something like, I think they were 12th. If my memory says, they were 12th for inside 50s the year that he averaged 85. Brisbane were number one last year. This is his first year back. Like I said, you take a bit of time. He's done a full preseason last year, full preseason coming this year. Can he get back to being like an 80 average? We saw how amazing a guy like Tex was last year with these kind of new rules allowing them to flourish. I could kind of see Joe have some really big games at times and be a pretty nice slot in your keeper league forward line. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if he can get close to that 80 mark, the high 70s type of average, just purely based on games where he's going to get on top of an opponent and go big, every now and then. And we've seen in the past he's got the potential to do that. So, I wouldn't put it past him.
The other guy's Dan McStay in this argument, though. It's like, would you prefer him? So he averaged 85 after Hipwood was injured, including 91 in his last 5. So just to note, the Lions did have that easy schedule on the run home as well. But, I mean, for me, out of McStay and Danaher, if you're going to pick one, I just give the nod to Danaher, given he is the number one target in there. Sure, he's going to get the number one defender, but he's also going to kick bags of goals when they're feeding it down his throat. So I've just got Danaher as that pick, later in your draft if you're looking for a forward. This one, another Remedy gut feel as my final main player for Brisbane. The Remedy kombucha gut feel. It's James Madden. Now, this is probably as loose as your ball lace that Kaes gifted us from Adelaide.
Well, at least this guy gets a game at the senior level.
Look, he provides something different to that Lions defence that I think potentially he could be the guy that fills that Birchall void. So he actually took over his number 14 in the off-season as well, if that's a sign. That's a sign. So we looked at a guy like Hind last year coming in for Essendon and playing that run and dash role. We've seen Sard do it in the past as well. Needless to say, another Irishman as well, Connor McKenna as well for Essendon back in the day. So James Madden, Irishman, he broke the record for like the 20-metre sprint back in the day at the draft. He still holds that record, I believe. 73 average in the VFL off 4 games, which included 1 ton. I just think, they've got guys like Starcevic. I think his lockdown work and Answorth, they're kind of like... Starcevic maybe could pop, but like Answorth is going to be, if he comes back from injury, is going to be that lockdown player. Madden, I think, just provides a little bit of a different look down back, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking at a different option than Daniel Rich. They've got Daniel Rich as the All-Australian. Could James Madden come in and be a surprise for us this year?
I like where your head's at, but I don't know. They played, I guess, Luke Hodge in that role beforehand. Then Birchwood comes in and plays the same one. It's a player that they kind of like to use the ball through, come out of defence and that sort of stuff. I just don't know if I can see James Madden being that guy.
It's a shift in infrastructure.
Okay.
As I've said before, it would be a changing game plan if they're looking for something fresh.
Yeah.
Look, they've gone out twice in a row after being really close. Do they try and find that guy that can break a line? And that's where I think, Madden. That's what I said. That's
one for your black books.
It's the remedy kombucha. I'm gonna have a sip.
Just on the chat, Gorn Fritchen on YouTube has said Berry will go 80 plus this year. So you've heard it. You've heard it here on the chat.
Agreed.
Do you have any honourable mentions for Brisbane?
Yeah, Charlie Cameron, just another of the forwards, and I think it is down to their schedule ending really weak for the Lions, but he had an absolute tear. I don't have his numbers here. I didn't write it down, but he was averaging like in the high 80s on the run home or even in the 90s. So if you think that can continue, go ahead. Small forwards for me, not a real big fan, but he does have some tackling upside. So he's only averaged 2 at the Lions and he averaged 4 twice when he was at Adelaide. So that's 8 points that if he starts tackling again, which he did in that end stretch to the season, could that be it? But I think he's more of a stream option. The other guy, Darcy Fort. I think Darcy Fort could be a cheeky option for us this year.
I reckon he'll play this year.
I think he'll get that forward status.
Yeah.
He's only starting as ruck status. Yep. He skips Tom Fullerton as the backup ruck, doesn't he? I think so. Fullerton's still a few years away.
I think they'll play him over Fullerton just because they've recruited him. They'll give him a chance early.
They've talked about him as well, just playing him as that forward ruck. So I think he's an option, and if the Big O happens to be out with the Rona or something for a couple of weeks, look out for Fort. And Jackson Price, probably another potential breakout candidate. Very low time on ground his first year. We looked at that for a guy like Schoenberg. Low time on ground, could break out if he gets the bigger time on ground numbers. And Cam from the Draft Doctors had a bit of a theory on the group chat. I don't know if this was already on the socials or anything like that, but Cam was showing us a photo that he had with Mitch Robinson and they were doing the secret wing handshake.
I do remember that.
Which, does that mean he's now a wingman for them? Is that what it meant?
Yeah, maybe there's a sign there.
I don't know if that's what Cam... I don't know if that was just an inside joke of Cam. But weird. Yeah. So anyway, just watch that one as well. That's Brisbane for you.
Subliminal messages in off-season content. Love to see it. Anyway, that's Dossie's review of a few keeper league relevant players from Brisbane, and now we'll move on to Carlton. All right, my turn to have a crack with some of my notes here. So hopefully they are substandard, but we'll see how we go. All right, first player I'm going to talk about is Jacob Wiedering. So it was a career best year for Wiedering, really, in fantasy anyway, and probably, actual footy too. Averaged 73.8 and played every game for the season. So that was a career first for Wiedering to actually stay fit and, available for every game. But as we all know, Dossie, tall defenders aren't everyone's favourite for fantasy. But he was super solid last season. So what I liked about his season last year is he just showed the ability that he could score a big ton. Had 300 plus scores. He had a top score of 117. He also had a few scores in the 90s as well. The issue is, because he is a key defender and he does have to play some lockdown footy, he had some very low scores as well. I think he had a score of 26 and a score of 36 too. So, not the sexiest name, but he's a player that I thought would just never be fieldable in fantasy. But at the moment, I think he's actually a decent option for your D4, D5 if you need one, if you're rolling pretty deep. He's just one that I think you'd kind of draft in the kind of later stages of your draft, but just expect him to kind of play each week and score you a 70. What do you reckon?
Do you worry about the no Liam Jones?
No, because Marchbank comes back.
Yeah, but Liam Jones, his sole purpose in life was to spoil the ball.
True.
And it allowed Wiedering to do a bit more.
Wiedering doesn't need to spoil because his contested grab is so good. Yeah, he can just take the mark. So,
I just mean,
obviously he needs to spoil, but you know what I mean. Like he's got a lot of points just through being able to take contested grabs in defence. I think he would just keep doing that. And I think isn't there someone else that's playing defence, or they recruited someone else, or there's someone they're eyeing off to come into defence. They have recruited someone from Western Bulldogs. No, I can't actually remember. But anyway, I think they've got someone else in the wings that's going to play Jones's role anyway. So it should be all good, I think. So yeah, I'm just happy with Wiedering. Just if you need just a reliable guy who's going to play each week and kind of fill your last defender option, I think Wiedering could be a one to look at.
Yeah, well, the ceiling like you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you want, just someone to pop like that.
Yeah, for sure. The next player
Lewis Young, is that who you're talking about?
Lewis Young, Western Bulldogs. Right?
Yeah.
That's right. Let's go with Zach Williams next. So he's a defender this year, and we welcome him back to the podcast after being 2G4P at the start of last year.
Wow.
I think he got B2P halfway through last year. If he didn't, he should have. But anyway, a lot of hype coming into last year after his move to Carlton. Always looked on the verge of greatness at GWS off that kind of halfback line. Then he got a little bit more midfield time towards the end of his career at GWS. But yeah, it just didn't really happen last year at Carlton. So he was in and out with injury. I think he got suspended early, and then I think he got injured once or twice in there.
I think he got suspended like before the season started.
Yeah, it was in pre-season, so he missed the first round. Saved a lot of people's classic teams, I think, by not being able to pick him for round 1. But yeah, he played in the midfield up until round 8, but after round 8, he didn't record another CBA for the rest of the season. Yeah. So he averaged 71.5 last year, in and out, like we said, with injury. But I think we can cut him a little bit of slack. I guess at a new club, learning the systems, was interrupted with that suspension. I think he had an injury in there as well. He's a player I'm willing to give another chance. Sam Doherty's going to be out for a bit by the sounds. I don't know how long that's going to take for him to get back and get fit and firing again, but he might just slot into a halfback line with a bit of opportunity there and go okay. Obviously, Nick Newman's probably the kind of main point getter back there.
Yeah.
So he might not, he might see a boost more than anyone else.
Sard there too, don't you?
Sard's doesn't rack up the fantasy points though. Like he's not he's a line breaker.
He did
not
in
a
his last
getter.
year at Essendon, but that was all infrastructure, wasn't it?
Yeah. You love saying infrastructure tonight.
Only in the pre-season, mate. Okay. I had to bring it back.
All right. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Zach Williams could get back to that 80 kind of mark again this year. What do you think?
Yeah, 80's probably around that mark.
Which is fine for a defender. Yeah. You take that.
His whole ceiling factor where we all thought, could he be a 95
Yeah, I've never been high on that, to be honest.
I was when he was at GWS because he actually did get that clock. And I'm just looking at his centre bounces now by round, and we said he did get a crack. And it's like looking at it, he got 61% centre bounces in round 2, which we know who's coming back off that that suspension. He should have been fit and firing. He didn't really come in firing at all. Had 40% centre bounces the next week. Then it was like 30, 20, 20. That's not really a guy that's actually got that opportunity. But with Chera coming in, Hewitt as well, he's not going to get in there. So I think, you're probably right about 80 to 85 is probably the max.
At GWS, I just found he was a player that would always just get to 80. Like he'd get there some way. And for you'd use him as like a D2 or a D3, your third defender. You take that every other week. So, I think if you just don't have high expectations and you just want a solid 80, I think he's a man who can give you one. Yeah,
and if somebody's willing to draft him as that, beast 90, 95 guy, then just let them take him because we wouldn't be going too early.
Yep. We'll move on to Lockie Fogarty. I'll pronounce it correctly for you, Dawson.
Very nice.
Started the year well last year. So he averaged 94 from his first 3 games last season.
Yeah.
Had 120 points in round 3, which is, I guess that was the high point of the season because he tapered off after that. He finished the season with an average of 67.2. And he showed glimpses last season, but just couldn't lock down a permanent spot in the midfield like a lot of people were expecting him to do. Kind of resigned to playing up forward, and by the end of the season, he was dropped. He was in and out of the side from a bit. He played one VFL game before the season shut down. He probably would have played a lot more VFL if the corona didn't take over and ruin everything. But he scored a monster 141 from that one VFL game. I guess, interestingly, he played the final game of 2021 back in the senior side. Scored 83 in that game and had 41% of the CBA share. So back in for the last round. Big bump in the CBAs. Show us what you can do, son. Last game, dead rubber.
Which is why he would have scored so good in the VFL. Yeah. Like 141. He would have just played guts.
Exactly. So I guess the issue is can he get some midfield time? With Chera, Hewitt coming in, I think that opportunity is going to be a lot harder to find for him this year, along with some other names. Pat it out. But yeah, look, with a new coach too, it's just hard to really take anything out of the end of 2021 as well. Because I guess, did they bring in a caretaker in the end? I can't remember for Teague. Or did he just get sacked after the season? But either way, his new coach is just going to change everything. And, what you think some players might be in line to do probably won't be the same now, unless maybe if you're at Hawthorn where the coach was already there type thing.
Look, you got to wait and see what Vossi thinks of everyone. And naming all the names you just said, Walsh, Cripps, Paddy Dow, Chera, and Hewitt, if they have brought him in, who I know you're going to talk about in a sec. But
Chera's 2G4P, mate.
No, Hewitt, I said.
Oh, you said Chera.
Oh, did I? Sorry, Hewitt, who you're going to talk about in a sec. Yeah. Like Fogarty, breaking my own rules here.
Yeah.
He can only really be that amazing scorer if he's a midfielder.
That's true. But I think there are some signs of potential, and there is a chance he does get a bit of a run if injuries or something like that happens. But I think just because he's listed as a forward, he's just worth owning. Don't go super high on him, but you got to fill up your team with some players, and I think he's a player worth owning. An average in the 70s. If everything goes right, I think playing as a forward, and again, kind of like Wiedering in defence. If you can get someone in your last forward spot who's averaging 70, you take that every day of the week, I reckon.
He'll I know Gibbons didn't play a full season, but he'll be the one that's selected now in that kind of, if he does get a crack, there's the spot in the small forward line, so.
Yeah, that's true. I get they've recruited Motlop, but I think he might be a bit green as well. So we'll see how we go. We'll move on to George Hewitt, as mentioned before by Dossie. So this one's going to be interesting because it sounds like he was recruited to play as a midfielder this year at Carlton, which is where he spent the last part of Sydney, his career at Sydney playing. He played in defence up until round 15 last year and then just became a full-time midfielder. He averaged 64 for the season, but from the time he started playing midfield, he averaged 78 from that point onwards. And for the last 3 games of the season, he averaged 83.7. But if you include in finals as his last 3 tally, because the last 3 ones on the AFL Fantasy website only show you the last 3 main season games. Yep. If you include finals, he actually averaged 98 from his last 3 because he had a big 100 plus in the only final that they played last year. I think he's someone you're recruiting, though, only if you're in the window and you need a defender. I think as a midfielder, I'm just not super confident on him as long term. It's just that if you're in the window, he could be a super handy pickup if you need one more defender. You want your D5 to average 80 type thing. Yeah. George Hewitt could be that guy that you pick up in the draft to do that. And I think he does go 80 plus this year as a full-time midfielder, around 80, between 80 and 90, I think, if everything goes to plan. But long term, he'll be a mid only and averaging that 80, around that 80 kind of mark. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't love that going forward.
It's interesting because they've played that defensive-minded midfielder for so long with your Ed Curnow. So it's like it's almost like they've got that spot there for him ready to go with Ed Curnow kind of tapering off, maybe spending a bit more time forward. Yeah. So the role's going to be there for him to potentially score even better and go with what he did later in the season with those maybe a 90 if he does get a lot of clock. I just don't. Yeah, I'm just not high either, and I agree totally with you in that if you're in the window, he could be a great defender, but once he's a midfielder, no thanks.
What do you think it does to Matt Kennedy?
Yeah, that's the interesting one for me. It's like you've just had a guy break out. It was in the second half of the season. To me, it just shows I don't think they're... I think did they only sign him to like a 1-year extension? I'll have to check that out. But
not great with contracts.
Yeah, it's worrying for Matt Kennedy. Like they've just brought in all the players that play his position. You've got Chera, Hewitt, guys coming in. Yeah, it's pretty worrying for him, I guess, is what I'd say. If they were happy with him, they wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, Kennedy owners will be sweating, I guess, because he was listed as a forward last year. He's not this year, and then he's got this added to it. So look, the average looks good on paper, but they're I think Kennedy owners would be sweating a little bit. Let's move on to Tom Deconing. So he had an up and down year in 2021. He was injured up until round 9, but played basically every game from that point onwards. Averaged 60.5 last season with a top score of 91, but a low score of 13, but that was injury affected, I think, as well. Averaged 70 from his last 3 games. So there were some good promising sides towards the end of the season. I think he's the future of Carlton's ruck department. He definitely has to be. And I think we'll see a leap this year. I don't know if it'll be huge, but long term, I think he's a player that you'd want to grab if you have like an aging ruck or you're planning for the future, because I think he's going to be the number 1 going forward for Carlton. The issue is you're just going to have to take Pitnet if you're relying on him as your number 1 ruckman, because they'll probably handcuff them and swap them in and out or that sort of thing as well. If he gets injured, you'll need him, and you're probably going to have to take Lewis Young, I think, with a late pick as well, because I think he's listed as a ruck too, and he does a bit of chopping in as well.
Yeah, because of Bevo. That's what everyone's listed as a ruck under Bevo.
I think that's the only 3 rucks on their list, though. So if you're going to be handcuffing those, you're going to have to handcuff him as well, I think. So
possibly. Yeah. I'm with you, though. I think Deconing is the ruck of the future for them, and I think down the track he's going to be a pretty good fantasy scorer. He's got a lot of tricks to his game, and he looks pretty good at ground level when he gets down there as well. He's like a big boy that can bend up, get down and get the footy. So I think still raw, but this year could be the year where he takes a step up if Pitnet until Pitnet's out if they decide to go solo ruck, that's when, what does Voss want? If Voss wants to go with a single ruck, we haven't seen that. If he goes single ruck, then, Deconing could be really good breakout this year.
What's your prediction on his average?
I still wouldn't go too much above 70 unless I know the setup, know.
I'm on board with that.
I'd say high 70s if he gets the role, and that's still not really great.
No, it's not great. But anyway, for the future, he'll be one to look at.
Yeah.
Liam Stocker is the last one of my 6 that I want to talk about. So there's just something about this kid I like. It could be just comedic value, I guess, from the time he tried to kick across the face and actually slotted a goal for the opposition at the opposite end. So I had a good chuckle at that one. It actually reminded me of when we were trying to fill the Paddy Dow video and we needed you to kick a goal.
No, let's not bring this on.
Had to let Dossie kick twice and miss twice, and went till the big fella just said,
had to hand it off to the Pythons, mate.
And I just slotted it first time. But anyway, look, came into the side after scoring 159 in the first round of the VFL last season. Played every game from then on as well. He only averaged the 56.6, but averaged 68 from his last 3, so it did improve towards the end. He was trusted with the kick-ins a bit more towards the end of the season. He took 14% of Carlton's kick-ins, but bumped that up to 20% over the final 3 rounds. So he gets a few extra stats there. I guess the worry, though, again, with the new coach, what does Voss do with him? We'll have to see what happens there. I'm not expecting huge things, but he's a player that I know the Carlton, list management team, they rated really highly because they traded up to get to him a couple of years ago. So they actually gave up a future first to get him. I know they're not great.
I just remember, if you ever watched that, go back and watch the footage that they released, it's like that was damning evidence. They were just like, yeah, this guy, I'm telling you, it's like, look at this footage, and they're just like seeing it for the first time. It's like, yeah, let's try it. It was, damning evidence against them. So
anyway,
I wouldn't be backing them as your argument here, mate.
I'm not 100% backing him, but I'm just thinking he's a player that they're going to want to put, because they've gave up so much for him. I think that they're going to want to put some time in.
So it'll be a bit of pressure on Vossi to give him a game.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. Anyway, he played every game last season, so we'll see how we go. Every game after he came into the side last season. So I don't know, if he gets a full pre-season, we could see a bit more development there as well. Not one I'm super high on, but I think as a bit of a stash option, I think give him a couple full seasons, he could show something, because he does look like a bit of a fantasy type. He's not a huge, he just seems to be like a kind of a kick getter kind of thing.
I see. I think only you'd stash him in like a dynasty. I just don't see
if
the
you got
upside.
deep, that's what I meant.
It has to be like real deep, because
I wouldn't be keeping him in my 16, that's for sure.
No, but it's even as a stash option for me, it's like, what's the upside? You've got Sard, you've got Newman, you've got Doherty when he comes back. Like, there's just so many ball users out the back line anyway.
Yeah, true.
For me, I'm probably not
I'm thinking more like 3 or 4 years down the track. He could be
so it is a dynasty.
Like a full on stash.
All right,
yeah,
okay.
Proper stash.
All right, yeah, I'll give you that one.
Yeah, okay. Honourable mentions. I'm not sure if this is honourable or dishonourable.
Here we go.
Paddy Dow.
Get around him.
I love the guy, and I love the guy just mainly
Should we break into chorus?
For the love we received on that song. But Dossie, I'm sad to say I'm off him. That midfield is only getting deeper at Carlton, and he just can't find the footy, unfortunately. He's allergic to it.
We'll see, mate.
So
we'll see.
I don't know. I've just got him there because it wouldn't be a Carlton review if I couldn't bring Paddy Dow. Matthew Wright's written, isn't Stocker injured, so he could actually be out. I'm not really sure. Have not been across that one, so he may be. Zach Fisher is another one that a lot of people want us to talk about. I think it's the same above though. That midfield is just getting deeper and deeper at Carlton, and I just don't think. I think Zach Fisher only scores well when he gets a bit of a midfield run, and it just doesn't happen often enough. I think a few people are all over Zach Fisher just for that one preseason you had where he went huge and everyone thought he was about to break out. But I know he's had injuries for the last 2 seasons essentially, and he shows glimpses when he does go in the midfield, but I just think the Zach Fisher midfield experiment's over.
Yeah, well, I think he basically said it himself last year or whenever. I think last year he was like, look, I'm just going to focus on my forward craft. I can see they kind of had a word to him. He's like, look, I think he spoke to the coach. He's like, I'm sick of trying to sort of get a gig. I want a spot. What can I do? I'll play this forward role. So therefore, fantasy-wise, no longer for me. But, I really like watching him play. He's awesome. He's an awesome little player and rats in and certainly cracks in there. And, yeah, Stocker is sidelined for a couple of months in the preseason here. But
It could be back early.
It's a syndesmosis.
Yeah.
So
that doesn't look good if it's
12
Cindy.
weeks.
The old Cindy. Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, like I said, it doesn't matter because we're stashing him for the future anyway.
That's right. In your deep dynasty.
That's it. All right. That wraps up the club reviews. Then we'll move on to, this is the membership stuff, I guess. So, yeah, if you enjoy the work we put in each week and you enjoy listening to the podcast, please consider supporting us and becoming a member. If you do become a member, we've got some great premium resources up there right now, Dossie. We've we've got the Drafty fantasy scores. So every draftee that was taken in last year's draft, we've got their fantasy averages up there. But this year, for the first time ever, we've got the Drafty analysis guide on our website. So that's a PDF document. It's kind of like a draft guide, I guess, but it has a written analysis of every player in the draft, purely from a fantasy perspective, along with all their numbers and stats and whether we think they're likely to debut this year or whether they're worth picking up in classic keepers or draft leagues, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, purely fantasy-focused drafty analysis guide. So that'll help you pick up your rookies and things like that in your draft next year. So yeah. Basically, we actually got one in the chat that says from Gordon Friction, you won't be disappointed if you become a member. So that's some good feedback from a signed up member there in the chat. But anyway, up there also is the breakout tracker. So that's the resource where you can compare any player in the competition or any early career competition to the best players in the competition at the same point in their careers to see how they track against them and if they're trending towards a breakout. We did a bonus episode on that last week. So that's another thing you get, bonus episodes. And the State League fantasy numbers we've released this week, or we've launched this week from last season as well. There's a few articles up on the website now about the top 5 scorers from each league, but then you can get all throughout the season we put out State League numbers so you can see who's performing well in the twos. Dawson, you've been a member for a few years now. You use the stats quite a bit, don't you?
I use it, yeah. I'm not even just saying this. I use it a lot. Yeah. I think centre bounce is...
I'm sure you're glad you're now on the pod. You don't have to pay for them anymore.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful. But no, the centre bounce attendance is one for me. Is probably the one I go to the most. I know I also use the State League scores, but I used to really like just reading Kaes' little wrap-up of that because that pretty much gives me all you need. But I've obviously the Drafty fantasy scores as well for your rookies in the preseason. And I've got a little comment here. I'll just read the very last little line here because it's a big paragraph that he's written. He's written a lot of them on these players. But pick 22, Josh Gota. Do you want to hear a little bit about him?
With a name like Gota, definitely.
This is from the Drafty analysis. Fantasy-wise, when running out of defence and with a player like Sean Haightley getting delisted, he has every chance to slot into that running defender role at the Kangaroos. That's the wise words from the Oracle.
Why did you pick Gota? Are you just on him?
I just went to a random player.
Oh, random player.
Yeah,
so you
just a random player.
Okay.
That's what you get. That's a taste.
I thought he might be one of your new boys, that's all. But yeah, a taster.
He's the GOAT.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, a taster of the Drafty analysis guide. So yeah, if you're a member, you'll get access to that as well. So head to our website, keepleaguepod.com.au, hit the membership button at the top, and you can have a look at some options there. Anyways, as a part of that, we read out gold members each week. We're going to do 10 a week this year because we struggled to get through doing just 5. So the gold members, thank you to these people for signing up. And these are the first people that signed up for 2022, essentially. So thank you to Harley Philp, Russell Beasley, Michael Boland, Josh Hutchinson, James Richardson, having a good one here on a terror here. Dylan Brooks, Dave Simpson, Nicholas Westerman, Alina Herman, and Henry King. So thank you to those goldies there. We also read out a podcast review each week. If you like our show, every kind of review and a 5-star rating really helps us climb the charts. This week, the Slug wrote, "Hey fellas, been listening to you boys this year as it's been my first year participating in a Keeper League. Already can't wait for next year. Dominating my mates in the draft. Love the show, fellas. Makes my drive home from work interesting every Tuesday. Cheers," from Slug.
Oh, you Slug.
Thank you, Slug. So, if you're keen to become a member, head to the website, check it all out, support the podcast, and you won't be disappointed. All right, let's get on to some listener questions. All right, first question comes from at Legless Simo. Is Bruce a trap, Dossie? So given how well Flynn and Briggs played for GWS when given the opportunity, what do you think? Is Bruce a trap?
Is he a trap? I think he scores really well if he gets the number one ruck role, but does he get it? I think, it's all down to how his body holds up.
It's all injury
and
based.
the role as well. Are they going to run with 2 rucks now?
I think they will, and I think it's going to be Bruce and Flynn. I reckon they will.
If they do that, then I think he's a trap.
Yeah,
look at that.
It could be handy. I think they're going to play Flynn mainly up forward. I don't know.
Look, I think let's look at the situation we're in right now. I think there's going to be some times where he gets the solo ruck with what's going to happen.
He'll probably just get injured before the season starts anyway. We won't have to worry about it. So we'll just see what happens in a few weeks. At Ninja Spood 1, who is the second ruck for Brisbane? So we talked about this before, and I think we feel like it's going to be Darcy Fort. I reckon they'll give him a run early, seeing though they've recruited him, and they probably want to show.
I think they'll give him a chance and see how he goes because
he can play forward.
Yeah, they just didn't have that person there last year.
They played Fullerton, but it kind of didn't really work.
Not at all. I saw some damning stats the other day. I just went to a random stat center game, and it was like, I think it was Grundy against Fullerton or something, and I saw it was disgusting.
At Woody J64, he's asked, is Haightley ever going to get a game? Can you keep him, and does he have any trade value? We kind of talked about him earlier. I guess like we talked about those injuries from last year, and we're hoping he gets a better run. I think it depends entirely on how deep your league is. In a mid-range league where you're keeping a 16-18, I reckon it's going to be tough. And I don't think he's got much trade value because I don't think too many people are going to want to take the punt on him to give up anything good to get him more than what you want anyway.
You're exactly right. Deeper leagues, he's an absolute hold, absolute stash. He's the perfect kind of stash because his upside's so massive. It's just the role and does he get it ever? And basically is what he said here. He's super young, so I'd be holding him in those dynasties. It's going to be a tough one, like you said, in those 16-18 range.
All right, Dossie, next question comes from Ruxin S. Do you want to read this one out? You got it on your screen?
Sure. Wait, is it this one or the one you're at?
It's one about Strawn.
Okay, Strawny. Is Strawny draftable? What does Thilthorpe average?
Oh, Thilthorpe. I still can't say that name properly. Look, I think Strawny's only draft was a handcuff, I think, if you own O'Brien. And I think Thilthorpe, I hate saying that. I reckon he averages between 60 and 70. I don't think it's going to be huge.
Yeah, it's going to take some time for Thilthorpe.
Yeah, like O'Brien's going to be their number one ruck, and Thilthorpe's going to chop out, so he's not going to get bulk time in there. He'll play it forward.
He's going to be an absolute gun in about 4 years.
I think he is going to be a gun player, but I just think not this year. No. Nicholas Ben has asked, I'm interested to hear how highly you rate Rayner, Jack Martin, and McStay. Are they potentially elite scorers, or are they going to remain average players who are just handy at best?
McStay, I think, handy at best. Streamer, I think they had a really easy schedule to finish the season. That's why he's got great numbers by his name. Again, I'd probably go Danaher over McStay. Happy to be wrong on that one if I'm proven wrong. But the other two guys, Jack Martin to me is just a clear standout. I'd rate him higher than the other two. Right now, he's actually proven it a couple of times.
Do you think from here on in though, Jack Martin ever averages more than 80?
Yeah, I can see it happening.
Okay.
Yeah, if he's fit, firing, I can see it happening for at least another year in his career. I
feel like he's just going to go at the 80 mark from now on. Like it's not going to go any bigger than that.
Is either of the other two going to go 80?
Nah, but I'm just saying, are they? That's not elite scorers. That's pretty average.
Elite, okay.
Yeah.
Potentially elite. Okay, yeah,
like
probably not elite.
Yeah. For, I guess, a forward. But
yeah, not elite.
Yeah, not elite for any of them. No, I can't see any of them becoming.
Well, Rayner's too young to tell when he hasn't had that role, but yeah.
I just don't think the way he plays, he's just a fantasy scorer. That's all. Yeah. Anyway, Chris Milne, if you can only keep two out of Jai Caldwell, Jackson Haightley, Sharp, and Quinton Narkle, who is it? I'm keeping Sharp and Caldwell.
Yeah, I'd say the same. And as much as I love the upside of Haightley and how amazing he could be, the theory is different to the reality, and Caldwell is actually going to play. So, yeah, those two guys are going to play, and Sharp and Caldwell, I'm on the same page. Yeah,
we did see Caldwell get injured last year, but he did, I think, ton up in the first round and then had a 50-point half in the final.
Yeah, well, and then they moved Parrish in the midfield. Yeah. So does he get back in there? Anyway, but at least I think he's going to be a first choice player in the 22, whereas Haightley, that's questionable. Haightley's got better fantasy upside than Caldwell though. Yeah, I think so too. Although, they've shown similar signs of GDS, so we'll see how they go. Stuart Ward, if you've got a stacked midfield, is Jared Berry a keeper? I think you're more of a Jared Berry lover than I am, so I'll let you answer this one. Stacked though, I mean.
Yeah, stacked. So,
Jeepers.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough.
I still love.
You need to know who the other midfielders are.
Yeah, really. Exactly, and how many keepers in general. Like if you need some defenders, or if
you can't play him on the field, then it's probably not worth keeping.
No.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, the way it goes. Mason Davies asked, Zach Fisher, is a 75 to 80 average attainable with a new game plan and an injury-free preseason? I said it before. I think he's a player that just needs to play in the midfield to score well. And that midfield depth just keeps growing at Carlton. So, I don't know. I'm not big on Zach Fisher. I can't really see him scoring more
75, 80.
maybe 70.
We saw a lot of small forwards last year struggle in. I think it was partly due to the new setups or whatever. How many small forwards actually scored well last year?
They never do.
No.
Like, they're just not scorers.
I think there was a couple the year before. Like we had
Toby Green is like, I guess, do you class him as a small forward?
No,
Yeah.
medium.
Yeah.
Medium.
It's none of them.
I don't, yeah, not for me.
Yeah.
And new game plan, what's that? How is he going to be helped? I think he'll still be a small forward.
Yeah, same. Michael Bilardi is asking, is it worth hanging on to Devin Robinson? You talked about him tonight.
Yeah, I already talked about that. I think in a deep league, the fantasy potential is huge. It's just the depth of Brisbane. I think it's going to be a patient process. And if he's not obviously going to be the guy this year, if they don't, if you've still got guys way ahead of him, which is probably going to be the case, it's going to be a slow burn, but I think a burn that will eventually light that candle.
I've got him, like I've mentioned earlier, and I just can't fit him into my best 16. So
yeah 16 is probably
not keepable for me.
tough.
I want to.
Third year breakout though.
Oh, I did it last year with a few of them, and it just bit me.
Yeah.
Phil Smeets asks, Caleb Poulter looks likely to be dropped in our Dynasty Keeper League. Is he worth drafting as a long-term keeper? Yes.
Poulter, yeah.
Yes. So it should be the goods. We'll talk more about him next week. We'll look at Collingwood next week.
Yep.
James Elms asks, expected Carlton CBA lineup splits. Is it as simple as Cripps, Walsh, Chera? I think it is almost, with a bit of Hewitt tied in there.
Dow, Walsh, Chera. Yeah, no, you're probably spot on. Cripps, Walsh, Chera.
Yeah, that'd be the main three.
Yeah. I'd say so. The fourth, that's going to be the question really, isn't it? Because like you said, so many vying for that spot.
They put Hewitt on a big contract and he played midfield at the end of last year. I think he will be the next one in there. Then you got Kennedy. Yeah. Dow Fisher.
Yeah, but do they like Walsh? Okay, Walsh could play wing though.
Yeah, he has in the past. I think though, like we saw him move inside and he was just frightening how good he was.
It is, but it's like, are you more frighteningly good with having a guy like, I don't know, don't want to say Kennedy in there as being a gun, but like, are you going to do better? You're going to do better with a Kennedy in your team than you have to plug a hole, I
think it's all going to come down to how Voss wants to, and the style he wants to play. So
wait and see.
If he plays a very Port Adelaide style, if he plays like a Port Adelaide style game plan, he might be able to roll those, Kennedys and Hewitts in there as well and chuck them on the outside. So
come on, mate.
Well, they do like the,
You had to bring him up, didn't you?
Yeah, I'll bring them up every week. You watch. Anyways, that is a wrap for the first podcast of the year. Thank you for listening. Well done, Dossie, getting through your first full episode as a permanent fixture in the podcast anyway.
Great debut, I would say.
Yeah, but anyway, it was fine. You did great. Get around us on our socials at Keeper League Pod on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter and YouTube, where we're streaming this tonight as well. That's about it. Drink some Remedy Kombucha. And that's about it for the first pod. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about Collingwood, Essendon and Fremantle. Stay tuned to the website this week. We'll have some articles up about these teams as well. So those people who don't have the time to listen to the pod in full but just want to flick through a few names, we'll have them up there as well. Plus, check out all of our other stuff on our website too, because there's plenty going up this off season. So yeah,
absolutely.
Anything else from you, Dossie?
Yeah, if you're into classic, get around. There's a little drop coming soon, so just keep an eye out on the old Point of Difference AFL Fantasy podcast if you want to hear a bit about that.
All right, lucky Kaes isn't here because he wouldn't let you talk about classic, but you can drop that one here.
You asked for a shout out.
All right, let's do it. Let's wrap it up for the night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Farewell.
See ya. See ya, peeps.